What is going on, beautiful people, and welcome back to the Chargers franchise here on Madden NFL 21. And it is the offseason now, as the Chargers look to improve off of their 13-3 season in which they lost in the wildcard round. So now they're looking to re-sign a lot of their key free agents, including Keenan Allen, Hunter Henry, just to name a few. And the first person we're going to get started with, of course, is Keenan Allen. He is 29 years old, so he may or may not have a lot of good years left in him, but he's asking for $79.5 million over the next 4 years. And as a superstar X-Factor receiver who is a 94 overall and still has a few years before he really starts to drop in dev, I don't think that it's too bad of an idea to bring him back, especially after the big year that he had. 100 catches, 1,333 yards, and 14 touchdowns. I think it's reasonable to re-sign him to that. Not only that, but I am actually going to increase the offer from the $79.5 million that he's asking for. So the offer is 4 years, $12 million in salary, $9 million in bonus, so that's $83.8 million over 4 years for Keenan Allen, and he is going to accept the deal. So Keenan Allen will be with the Chargers, hopefully for the extent of this series. Now that's out of the way, let's look at the rest of the free agents. So we have Desmond King, Hunter Henry, like I mentioned before, Mike Pouncey as well, Denzel Perryman, Michael Badgley, just to name a few of these guys. There are a lot of very key free agents that we're looking at, but I'm going to let most of the people go here, but I am going to try to re-sign Bronson Rechsteiner, and he does accept his 3-year deal worth $6.9 million. Nice. So we get our fullback back, and Cordy Glenn, I'm actually going to let him go. He just really didn't make much of an impact on the offensive line this year. Monte Nicholson is another guy I'm going to let go. Taylor Gabriel is somebody that I would like to bring back, as he had his best season of his career, 784 yards, 5 touchdowns on 61 catches. But I'm only going to offer him a 1-year deal. He is 30, and we could probably stand to do better in the slot. But understandably so, he's going to decline, and he'd like to play for a new team. I'm going to offer Ty Long $850K, which might be underpaying him. He actually had a pretty good year punting the ball, but he accepts it nonetheless. So we bring him back. Now Rayshon Jenkins, who was a starting free safety, had a pretty good year, 85 tackles, 8 for a loss, and 2 interceptions. Now I still do have Nasir Adderley, but I am going to bring back Jenkins on a 2-year deal worth $6.4 million, and he is going to accept it. So Rayshon Jenkins returns as a starter at free safety. Michael Badgley, the kicker with 96 kick power, I'm going to offer him 1 year and $2.7 million, and we're going to see if he accepts here, and he does just that. So Michael Badgley returns. We keep the special teamers around, and now Mike Pouncey, I'm going to bring him back on a 1-year deal worth $7.95. I know he's up there in age, but I'm going to bring him back so I can draft a center. And now Hunter Henry, I'm going to offer 4 years, $35.8 million, and he is going to accept it. So we get our tight end back in Hunter Henry, who's one of the better tight ends in the league. And now Desmond King, he's a guy I really want to bring back as well. Obviously Chris Harris Jr. and Casey Hayward aren't getting any younger, and King definitely has a bright future ahead of him as one of the starting corners. So I'm going to offer him 3 years, $46.4 million over those 3 years, and he is going to accept it. So now we keep our corner tandem together. So now we look at some of these retirements. Cameron Wake retires, as does Patrick DeMarco. Wake was playing for the Bengals this past year. Marcus Gilbert also retires for Arizona. And going through more of them, Sean Lee retires after 11 years. Jason Peters retires after 17 years. Alex Mack after 12. Donald Penn retires. I thought he was already retired. A.Q. Shipley retires as well. Mercedes Lewis retires from Green Bay. 3 retirements for the Patriots: Ryan Khalil, Jason McCourty, and Julian Edelman. Richie Incognito retires, as does Andrew Whitworth. Delaney Walker and Thomas Davis both retire. Emmanuel Sanders retires. Dwayne Brown, Greg Olsen, and of course Pete Carroll retired. Jared Veldier retires from the Steelers, and that is going to do it for the retirements. Now we look at the Chargers free agency, and it was pretty quiet. They do bring in Tajay Sharp, the former Titan. Danico Autry is also signed, as well as Bobby Massey, and they bring back Forrest Lamp. So now we look at free agency as a whole. Alvin Kamara goes to Washington. Richard Sherman goes to the Raiders. Kareem Hunt to the Broncos. Brandon Graham to the Broncos as well. Sheldon Rankins to the Colts. Nikel Roby-Coleman to the Bengals. Jared Cook also goes to Washington. Jarrell Casey, the former Titan, going to Dallas. The Titans get Everson Griffin. James White goes to the Bears. Jordan Reed goes to the Jaguars. Alejandro Villanueva to Tampa Bay. Alshon Jeffrey goes to Cincy. Melvin Ingram to Tampa. Will Lutz goes to the Bengals as well. Tack McKinley goes to the Seahawks. Taylor Gabriel goes to the Jets. Trey Burton goes to Buffalo. Sheldon Richardson to Miami. Greg Zuerlein goes to the Giants. Jimmy Smith to Buffalo as well. Kendrick Bourne also going to the Bills. Zach Pascal goes back to the Colts. Tariq Cohen goes to Tampa as well. John Ross goes to the Raiders. Cameron Brate to the Giants. David Johnson going to the Jaguars, as is Jameis Winston. Nelson Aguilar goes to the 49ers. And that's it for the key free agents. And now we go into the NFL draft. And I controlled the entire first round for each team just to make sure they drafted the right players that they actually need. And the Miami Dolphins are first on the clock this year, so there's no Tua to tank for this year. They already have Tua. So with the first pick, the Dolphins select Kevin Joyner out of USC. He's 6'4", 311 pounds, and he's a run stopper. Now, Miami's biggest need was right tackle. Just offensive line in general is a big need for Miami, but there really weren't many offensive linemen that they felt comfortable with reaching on. So they get Joyner, who has 96 strength. He's a very strong defensive tackle and probably be playing DN in the Dolphins 3-4. And with the second pick, the Washington football team selects Bart Brathwaite, the quarterback out of Hawaii. And this probably spells the end for Dwayne Haskins' time in Washington. Brathwaite is more of a throwback style quarterback where he doesn't really run a whole lot. I know it says scrambling there. I'll fix that. Don't worry about that. But his throw power is pretty damn good, and he's pretty accurate as well. So good selection there for Washington getting their quarterback. And with pick number 3, the Jacksonville Jaguars select Ronnie Granger, the cornerback out of Rutgers. Now, I'm sure a lot of people are going to question why the Jaguars went corner here instead of like outside linebacker. Well, a lot of people look at Ronnie Granger as the best overall player in this draft. He can play so many different positions. He can play middle linebacker in a sub linebacker situation, and he can play either safety position as well as corner. He's just a complete Swiss Army knife, and I think this is a really good pick for the Jaguars. And moving on to pick number 4, the Las Vegas Raiders select Michael Lynch, the edge rusher out of Rutgers. So 2 Scarlet Knights go back-to-back, and the Raiders absolutely needed help on the edge. Now, he's more of a 4-3 edge rusher, and I don't know how he's going to fit in Oakland's 3-4, but he's a very speedy pass rusher, has a lot of finesse to him. Now, there's a rumor going around that the Raiders are just really not happy with Clelin Ferrell as of right now, so this pick is understandable, and he will most likely be a day 1 starter across from Max Crosby. So with the 5th pick in the draft, the Jaguars select Nicholas Overton, and this is pretty interesting. The Jaguars have now spent 4 first-round picks in the past 2 years, all on defense. So they're looking to rebuild that secondary that they had years ago. Overton is likely to start at free safety over Jared Wilson, but they are really neglecting their issues at linebacker so far in this draft. So now the Jets with a very surprising pick here as they spend the 6th overall pick on Kyle Klopfenstein, the quarterback out of Buffalo. Now, obviously, Sam Darnold is not an Urban Meyer pick, so this is understandable in a way, but I'm not sure about Klopfenstein's potential as a quarterback in the NFL. He's more of a scrambler type, doesn't have the strongest arm in the world, and it's going to be really interesting to see what he does this year with the Jets. He's more of a Tim Tebow style quarterback, so maybe that's why Meyer wanted to draft him here. But we'll have to see how this works out, and we'll have to see what they do with Darnold now. As we go to pick number 7, the Tennessee Titans select Taj Choice out of Georgia. He's a strong safety and is kind of a hybrid type guy. You can put him in the box or have him in coverage. Tennessee definitely needed a strong safety after letting Kenny Vaccaro go in free agency. and he can be a playmaker. This is a very complimentary guy to Kevin Byard, and a much-needed pick for a very poor Tennessee secondary. And speaking of poor secondaries, the Carolina Panthers with pick number 8 pick up Jason Wade, the cornerback out of Southern Miss, and he is a very good man-to-man corner who can also play in the slot for him. Dante Jackson needed another corner across from him, and getting the speedy Jason Wade was a great selection for him. Now, Jackson is in a contract year, but I do think the Panthers will end up bringing him back, and this could be one of the better corner tandems in the league in just a few years. With pick number 9, the Denver Broncos select Garrison Gilmore, the defensive tackle out of Oklahoma. Now, the Broncos run a 3-4 defense, so Gilmore might play end. He could even play tackle for him. He's a pretty big guy, and he's actually pretty strong as well. He is a great run stopper in the middle, and honestly, Miami probably could have picked him at number 1 if they really wanted to, and I don't think I'd have too big of a problem with it either. But he looks to be a day 1 starter for Denver, either at end or at nose. It really doesn't matter. He's definitely a plug-and-play guy. At pick number 10, the Pittsburgh Steelers replaced Vince Williams with Demarius Williams, the middle linebacker out of Clemson. And this is a day 1 starter in my mind. They really don't have anybody else next to Devin Bush who really can shut it down the way that Williams does. He's a great run stopper and really good in coverage as well. So the Steelers linebacking core is looking very strong right now with the addition of Williams. The Detroit Lions with the 11th pick select Tyler Harrison, the right guard out of Wisconsin. So in a relatively weak offensive line class, the Lions end up getting the first offensive lineman off the board at pick 11. When it comes to strength and overall just making impact blocks, Harrison is definitely a good pick here, but he does have to learn certain techniques as far as pass blocking and run blocking. As you see, his ratings there aren't very strong. But overall, the Lions needed help on the offensive line, desperately you might say. So honestly, I can't really argue with this pick too much at all. So at pick number 12, the Miami Dolphins select Sean Clark, the right end out of Kansas State. I probably could have seen Miami possibly taking Harrison if he was still on the board here, but they decided to sit at 12 and pick up Sean Clark as they really needed another edge rusher opposite of Shaq Lawson. He's a pretty good edge rusher as far as power moves and strength goes. Not a lot of finesse to his game, however, and sometimes he struggles with getting off of blocks, but overall, he could help generate a really good pass rush, which is something the Dolphins really needed defensively. And this Dolphins defense is starting to get a lot of key pieces, and they could look scary this year. With the 13th pick in the draft, the Minnesota Vikings pick up Andrew Shepard, the edge rusher out of Tennessee. Now, Danielle Hunter is great at left end, so Shepard will probably play right end, where they did sign Randy Gregory, but I don't know if the Vikings trust Gregory to stay out of trouble and healthy overall. So getting Shepard here, who's a pretty good pass rusher in his own right, was probably the ideal move. He'll have to work on his power, however, but a good pick here for Minnesota nonetheless. Now with one of the head scratchers of this draft so far, the New York Giants draft Weasley Johnson out of Texas. He's a good man-to-man corner, and it's no knock on the player. It's just the Giants don't really need help at cornerback. I mean, they have James Bradbury and Mackenzie Alexander. Maybe they're trying to get younger at the position. But overall, I just don't really agree with them picking a corner here, as they had other needs that they could have addressed with this pick. At pick number 15, the Falcons pick up Russell Fox, the cornerback out of USC. I don't have a big problem with him getting a corner here, as Fox is one of the better in the draft, and overall, the Falcons cornerback room is just okay. And I know they picked up AJ Terrell last year in the first round, but I don't think he's that good of a player, and Cre'Von LeBlanc and Kendall Sheffield are just not very good. So I like the pick of Fox here. And the Packers pick up Greg McKnight, the running back out of Notre Dame, with the 16th overall pick. The Packers actually had to trade Aaron Jones after putting him on the franchise tag, and they wanted more of a speed back, and honestly, A.J. Dillon is just not that. So they pick up McKnight, who's more of a speed back, who can catch out of the backfield as well. Honestly, his main issue is just strength and like stiff arming people, getting him off him. But overall, he's a pretty decent pass blocker as well, so a good pick here for the Packers. And with the 17th pick, the Jets used the pick they got from the Seahawks to get Kevin Catharty, the free safety out of Eastern Washington, so we get an FCS guy off the board. Now, his coaches have said that he's a bit of a procrastinator when it comes to certain things, like reading his playbook and whatnot. But he has all the physical tools to be a really good free safety, and he helps with the replacement of Jamal Adams. Of course, Marcus May moved to strong safety, so Catharty will most likely be the starter at free safety now for the Jets. At pick 18, the Cincinnati Bengals select Jamario Ash, the edge rusher out of Cal. And this is a guy who easily could have gone top 10, but he had a lot of character issues in college. He got suspended from the team a few times, and that caused his draft stock to drop exponentially. But he's still a very good player, and honestly, I know a lot of people are going to say this is a perfect pick for the Bengals because of the character issues. But overall, he's a good pass rusher and would be a good replacement for Carlos Dunlap as long as he can stay in the field. But he's more of a 3-4 edge rusher than a 4-3, so we'll have to see how he adjusts to the Bengals' 4-3 defense. So now pick number 19, and the San Francisco 49ers pick up Shaquille Walden, the wide receiver out of NC State. And honestly, they probably should have traded out of this pick. I know a lot of the corners that they wanted were off the board at this point, but getting a receiver here doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you have a lot of receivers still in the room despite the loss of Kendrick Bourne. And Walden's really not all that different from Deebo Samuel, which makes it even more of a head scratcher. But maybe they're looking to put him at tight end or something behind George Kittle. I really don't know what they were doing here. And with pick number 20, the Chicago Bears select Christian Keaton, the quarterback out of Florida State. And honestly, this is the guy that I feel like the Jets probably should have taken back at pick number 6. Now, the Bears did let Mitchell Trubisky go in free agency despite making the playoffs this year. So they're starting brand new at the quarterback position, and Keaton is probably the best quarterback overall. He's very comparable to Josh Allen in that he has a very strong arm and is very athletic, but sometimes struggles with his accuracy. But honestly, there are a lot of people who are saying Keaton was probably the best quarterback overall in this draft. But Washington really wanted Brathwaite to go back to the old style of quarterback. But Keaton is a perfect quarterback for the Chicago Bears, and hopefully he can be the one to turn the franchise around. Now with pick 21, the Cleveland Browns select Alex Quincy, the middle linebacker out of Clemson. Middle linebacker is a huge need for the Browns. Honestly, linebacker in general is just a big need for the Browns, but they get the best one on the board currently in Quincy, who's a pretty speedy guy overall. Just kind of struggles with getting off of blocks for the most part, but he does read the run pretty well. Also probably has to get better in coverage as well, but a good pick here for the Browns. And at pick number 22, the Buccaneers select Lindsey Hatchett, the defensive tackle out of Miami. Now, he's not going to play nose tackle for Tampa. Obviously, they still have Vita Vea there. But Ndamukong Suh is definitely getting up there in age, so they needed a replacement for him. And Hatchett is the guy, so we'll probably move to right end behind Suh and just learn from him for a year before becoming the starter in Tampa. So now, pick number 23, the Patriots select Ladarius Wilkins out of Miami. The Patriots traded away Dante Hightower, so they needed a replacement at middle linebacker next to Jawan Bentley, and they get their man in Wilkins, who is a field general and a run stopper, and definitely fits this defense. He could be just as good as Hightower one day, but he'll have to improve his coverage and his play recognition if he really is to be the replacement that the Patriots expect him to be. But overall, a good pick. It fills a need for them, and we'll just have to see what Belichick and company can do with him. So now the Chargers are on the board, and there are a lot of different places that they could go with this pick. They could use an outside linebacker, but there aren't a lot of them who fit into a 4-3 scheme. Offensive line would be a good pick as well. Maybe they get Ben Alexander. But instead, they pick Calvin Carmichael, the wide receiver out of Rutgers, so another Scarlet Knight is off the board. Now, obviously, they still have Keenan Allen, but Mike Williams is in a contract year this year, and I'm not quite sure that they're going to bring him back. So bringing in Carmichael makes sense for the future, especially with a lot of other needs not available at this pick. But overall, he's one of the more talented receivers in this draft class. Not very fast, but a great route runner. So now with pick number 25, the Arizona Cardinals go wide receiver and pick up Andrew Haskins, the receiver out of Miami. Now, I know a lot of people are going to criticize this pick because they have guys like Christian Kirk and Andy Isabella. And they probably could have and should have gone offensive line here. But I guess they wanted to get another weapon for Kyler Murray. So Haskins, one of the better receivers, one of the more physical receivers in this draft class. And honestly, this could end up being a really good pick if they end up getting him to be a starter. So now, pick number 26, the Baltimore Ravens pick up Isaiah Byrd, the left tackle out of Virginia Tech. And he's most likely going to play guard for Baltimore instead of left tackle. He's not a great pass protector, so I wouldn't have him covering Lamar's blind side at all. So overall, I think this is a pretty good pick for Baltimore. It just depends on where they put him on the line. Right guard or left guard would probably be ideal. With pick number 27, the Buffalo Bills pick up right tackle Jimmy Lewis out of Alabama. He's another guy who probably plays better at guard overall. He is a better pass blocker than run blocker, but his run blocking isn't too bad. And Quentin Spain's getting up there in age, as is John Feliciano, so Lewis is most likely going to move to one of those guard spots and be the future there for the Bills. With pick number 28, the Dallas Cowboys select center Ben Alexander out of Tennessee. And honestly, I really like this pick for Dallas. Of course, Travis Frederick has retired for the Cowboys. So now they get their replacement at center. And honestly, this is overall one of the better offensive linemen in this draft. He's a really good run blocker, and it's actually not too bad at pass blocking either. So he'll definitely be able to create holes for Zeke and block for Dak. With pick number 29, the Philadelphia Eagles select Greg Thomas, the wide receiver at LSU. And honestly, receiver is such a big need for Philly. Even after picking Jalen Reagor, their receiving core still just is not very good at all. So they get another weapon for Carson Wentz. Now, the only real issue with Greg Thomas is he's just not very fast. But he fits pretty much just every other criteria as far as receivers go. He can jump very high, he's very good at catching in traffic, and his route running is not too shabby either. So could he fill a huge need for the Eagles and help them get their receiving core on track? We'll have to see. With pick number 30, the Kansas City Chiefs select Zaire Oliver, the outside linebacker for Clemson. Oliver might actually end up being a really good pick here, as linebacker was a big need for him, and now they have a third guy to go with Dorian O'Daniel and Danny Trevathan, who they just signed in free agency. And he is a developmental guy, but I think he's a day one starter for the Chiefs as well. With the 31st pick in the draft, the New Orleans Saints select Bobby Moats, the wide receiver out of Michigan. With Emmanuel Sanders retiring, the Saints really needed another big-time receiver across from Michael Thomas. Now, some people think that Traquan Smith or Deontay Harris could be those guys, but obviously the Saints wanted to get another guy there, so they get Moats, who's a deep threat receiver. And with the final pick of the first round, the Indianapolis Colts select Tyrone Harper, the cornerback out of Michigan State. And this pick is more of two things. One, in the NFL, you need a really good slot corner, which Tyrone Harper is. And two, the Colts just didn't really have any glaring needs that could be filled at this point in the draft. So Tyrone Harper is a good pick to go behind Rocky Sin and Kenny Moore, who missed all of last season due to an injury. So good pick for the Super Bowl champs. And now we go into the rest of the draft for the Chargers, as we're done with the first round now. Into the second round, they pick Vernon Michaels, 47th overall. The free safety out of Iowa is a guy that will probably add more competition to the free safety spot. Rayshon Jenkins did resign, and they still have Nazir Adelaide, obviously. There just wasn't really a whole lot at this pick that I really felt comfortable with given to the Chargers. So Michaels is the pick here. And now we go into later in the second round. They pick up center Sean Sullivan out of USC. Obviously, Mike Pouncey is getting up there in age, so they're going to need a replacement at center. And Sullivan is the pick here. Pretty good pass blocker. Could stand to improve as a run blocker for the most part. But honestly, he could play left tackle as well, or left guard. for the Chargers if they really need him to. So he'll probably be more of a depth guy for the next year or so until Pouncey ends up leaving. And now we go to the 3rd round, and the Chargers pick up Donovan Harris, the right end out of Miami. He's a perfect fit for a 4-3 defense. And while I don't really expect him to start with Joey Bosa and Uchenna Nwosu still there, this is a very good rotational pass rusher, and we'll probably see him a whole lot in 3rd down situations. But for this stage of the draft, I think is a pretty good pick for the Chargers. And now we go later into the draft, into the 5th round, and we pick a familiar face to Craniac Gaming. Former Heisman Trophy winner, Baltimore State running back Josh Seymour. Seymour is an absolute speedster at running back and probably could be a kick returner for the Chargers. His big issue, however, is he's just not great at breaking tackles, whether it's juking out anybody or running over people. He just can't really do either. And durability is also a big worry for him. But the Chargers get a kick returner at very least. Now, Tevin Oldman, the tight end out of Georgia, is the next selection for the Chargers. And they needed a new backup to Hunter Henry as Virgil Green left in free agency. Oldham not a great blocker, but he's a really good receiving tight end. But getting better at run blocking has to be a priority for this guy if he's to stick on the Chargers roster. They already have a receiving guy in Henry, so Oldham has to step up as a blocker. So good addition there for the Chargers. And now they pick up D'Angelo Peak in the 6th round, a wide receiver out of Youngstown State. Just another guy to add some depth to receiver for the Chargers. He doesn't have top end speed, but he's very agile and has good hops as well, and is decent enough as a route runner as well. So we'll have to see what he does for the Chargers. His change of direction is pretty good as well, and he can stay on the field for long periods of time and is a decent enough kick returner. So now we move on to pick 184 in the draft, and the Chargers pick up Joe Gardner. He's a right outside linebacker out of Troy, and he's a 4-3 fit, not really a pass rusher at all. He's decent enough at run stopping, but doesn't get off blocks very easily, and is just not very good in coverage at all. So he's another developmental player that the Chargers have picked up. And now into the 7th round, they pick up another tight end, this time Lawrence John Charles out of Albany. And he's a distant cousin to the John Charles family that you guys know from Mr. Hurricane's Kalispell series. He's not a receiving tight end at all. He's mainly just a blocking tight end, which had some people lose appeal in him. But overall, I think this is a good pick for the Chargers as it fits a need. And now with the final pick of the draft for the Chargers, they pick up quarterback Deron Cooper out of UCF. And honestly, he's more of a developmental quarterback as well. He has a good enough arm, but his accuracy is lacking completely. People have said that he should move to receiver, but he insists that he's a quarterback, so we'll have to see what he does with the Chargers in preseason. Now, looking at the draft overall, I feel like this is a pretty good draft for the Chargers as they fill their needs and get a really good player in Calvin Carmichael, as well as a few other good players who could be role players right away for this team. But we'll just have to see what they can do in the preseason to see if they even make the team, at least in some of the cases of these players. So now we look at some of the subscriber-made players who got drafted. Wyatt Winterfeld, the wide receiver out of Boise State, ends up going to the Carolina Panthers in the early 2nd round as well. Not the speediest receiver in the world, but he's a very good pass catcher and a very good route runner. So he might actually fill a need for the Panthers here. And hell, he could even play tight end for them as well. With the 20th pick in the 2nd round, the Bears select Johan Leituala, the middle linebacker out of San Diego. Now, they did get Dante Hightower from the Patriots, but he is in the final year of his contract and is up there in age, so maybe Leituala is expected to sit behind him for a year and just learn. He does need to get better at certain things like block shedding and play recognition, but overall, I like the pick. He can actually play outside as well, so maybe he could be a replacement for Robert Quinn, who's getting up there in age as well. So now in the 3rd round, the Minnesota Vikings selected Ben Bones out of Auburn. He's one of the better running backs as far as just overall being balanced. But the Vikings are just really deep at running back, so I'm just not sure how much playing time he'll get behind Dalvin Cook and Alexander Mattison. But I think he can be a good running back in this league as long as he works on a few things. So now we go to late in the third round, and the Chiefs select Chris Moss, the wide receiver out of Ohio State. Now, the Chiefs lost to Marcus Robinson in the offseason, so I think Moss is going to be the replacement here. But overall, I think this is good value in the third round. He's a speedy receiver, just has to work on his route running a little bit, but I think he's a good number 4 option for Mahomes. So now we move on to the 5th round, and the Eagles pick up Derek Watson, the free safety out of Eastern Illinois. This is a real sleeper pick. I think he probably could have gone earlier in the draft, and I wouldn't have too big of an issue. He'll probably start out as a special teamer, but he could end up being a starting free safety in this league. Now, in the 6th round, we stay at safety, and the Las Vegas Raiders pick up Ashton Steed out of Texas A&M. Now, Demarius Randall is probably going to be the starter this year, but he's up there in age, and Steed will have to compete with fellow rookie DeMarco Boyd for that starting job later on. But I think Steed will be a good special teamer at very least. And the final subscriber-made player that was selected is defensive end Eric Yeeples for the Green Bay Packers. And he was actually 1 pick away from being Mr. Irrelevant. So the defensive end out of Georgia is a long shot to make this roster, but it is possible. Anything is possible. If you believe, you can achieve, but we'll just have to see what he does in Green Bay. So now we take a look at the Chargers schedule real quick, and first the preseason, they battle the defending champion Colts in week 1, then they head to Cincinnati to take on the Bengals, and they head back home to take on the Vikings before finishing up with the 49ers. Looking at the regular season schedule, and they have 4 road games to begin the season, at the Bills, then at the Giants, then at the Raiders, then at the Ravens, before a 3-game homestand against Washington, the Bengals, and the Eagles. And then they head to Arrowhead to battle the Chiefs before a week 9 bye week. Then they open up with Sunday Night Football at Jerry World to battle the Cowboys. Then a 4-game homestand against the Broncos, Browns, Colts, and Raiders. Then they take on the Broncos. Then they battle the Chiefs at home before ending the season in Pittsburgh against the Steelers. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I am hyped for year 2 of the Chargers franchise, and I'm ready to get it started, and hopefully we can get a Super Bowl in year 2 just like we did in the Bucs franchise, but we'll just have to see. Now, if you guys enjoyed the offseason, let me know in the comment section below. Hit that like button, and if you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button as well, and turn your notifications on to join the notification gang. That way, every time I upload a video, you guys be notified. We gonna keep that mofo rolling here on Craniac Gaming, and if you want to see more from the channel, check out the playlist in front of you.
I've been suffering in silence, and they paid me no mind. I've been stuck inside the shadows for a really long time. It feels like they forgot about me. Well, I'm here to remind you that the world is gonna hear me when it's my time to shine.